Hello Internet, we're going to be looking at the 1990 film from William Friedkin, The Guardian, a return to horror 17 years after he made The Exorcist. Is it a triumphant return to horror? No, it's a mixed bag return, but one thing is for absolutely certain, the people that designed the cover to this DVD, the posters and the opening credits to this movie absolutely want you to know that the same guy who did The Exorcist is responsible. They use a very similar font, well, almost exactly the same font, and they copy the font from the opening credits of The Exorcist and use the same thing in the opening credits of The Guardian, which really isn't fair. When you make a masterwork like The Exorcist, to compare The Guardian to it, The Guardian is always going to lose. The Guardian's not a great film anyway, but what I'm going to try and do is sort of approach it on its own merits. What was intended, what works, what doesn't work, rather than compare. Say that it's the red-headed stepchild of The Exorcist. It's not fair on this movie. Having a poster like this and a font like this doesn't do this movie any favours. Friedkin himself says that it's funny that people call this a return to horror because he doesn't consider The Exorcist to be a horror movie. He's wrong, but what he intended this movie to be, he says, it was a modern-day fairy tale. And you can see elements of that in it. The trouble with The Guardian is you can see elements of lots of different things in it, none of which coalesce into a coherent whole. It's not a secret that this movie went through a ton of rewrites. It's also not a secret that the original scriptwriter Stephen Volk had a nervous breakdown during the rewriting process with Friedkin over this. Probably the process of getting this to the screen says more about the final products that we got. There's a very strange sort of synchronicity going on. Originally this was supposed to be directed by Sam Raimi. It's based on a book called The Nanny by a guy whose name eludes me at the moment. The internet is your friend, look it up if you're interested. But a script was written and it was originally to be directed by Sam Raimi, who eventually passed on this to make Darkman. Now, the producer of The Guardian used to be an agent, and he used to be Friedkin's agent. So, reading between the lines, it seems like Friedkin took this on as a favour to his old agent. Undertook numerous rewrites, added in elements, and ultimately what you get from The Guardian, bizarrely, if you sort of know the history of it, is a William Friedkin Sam Raimi movie. An awful lot of the elements that Friedkin added, the druidic stuff, the sort of sentient tree spirit, the killer tree thing, leads to tons of moments in this movie, and especially the climax, which seems like some sort of bizarre art house Evil Dead. So if you're at all interested in what would happen if William Friedkin made a Sam Raimi Evil Dead type movie, that alone, if that piques your interest, then check out The Guardian. And I'm not whistling in the wind here. We're talking at the climax of the movie. Our hero is in a blue shirt, unbuttoned to the chest, wielding a chainsaw, attacking a sentient killer tree with gallons and gallons and gallons of blood soaking him. It's impossible not to think of Bruce Campbell. It's impossible not to think of Evil Dead. Earlier on in the movie, the tree comes to life and attacks some guys, and you're thinking Evil Dead again straight away. The Guardian of the title, the nanny played by Jenny Seagrove. It's a moment where she totally supernaturals out and starts flying, and again that's the sort of the hovering, possessed demons of the Evil Dead. It's a strange mixture of weird art house Evil Dead meets modern day fairy tale meets sort of psychological thriller. It's no coincidence that 2 years after this, Hand That Rocked the Cradle came out and was a smash breakaway hit, stripped out all the supernatural stuff, got to the real meat of the psychology of letting a stranger into your house to look after your child, and was a smash hit. This film lays out so many paths and so many different sort of potentials, and then never really follows them through. As I mentioned earlier, it's let down at the very, very start by the opening credits, which make you think of The Exorcist. But then it's hamstrung straight away. There's some opening text which tells you about druidic cults and human sacrifices to tree spirits and things like that. And then there's a little prologue with a previous family, not the family you focus on in this film, but the family that the nanny worked for the year before, of her stealing the baby, sacrificing it to the tree. And essentially what you've got is a little condensed 5-minute version of what happens for the rest of the film thereafter. So when they hire the nanny, it's like, okay, so she's the druid one that they told us about in the start, and we've already seen her snatch another baby and sacrifice it to the tree gods, so she's going to do the same thing over again. So you're just sitting and watching it all unfold. You're waiting for everything to happen that you've already been told is going to happen. So it's a very passive viewing experience. That said, and I will talk about some of the things that don't work, but I can't quite get away from the movie. There are some affecting pieces and set pieces and scenes, as you would expect from a director as skilled as William Friedkin. He's not going to fall into a pig pen and come out completely smelling like pig shit. The man has skill, the man has talent, and there are times in this, like little diamonds in the rough, where it shines through. It's just that the film as a whole is neither beast nor fowl. It's not a complete entity. So as I say, it's just happening in front of you rather than engaging you in any sort of speculation. So what's good? Jenny Seagrove, the guardian of the title, the nanny that they hire, knocks it out of the park. She's got all the chops. She's got absolutely everything you would expect. She says on an interview for this that she actually wanted to strip out all of the supernatural stuff and just have it be about a nanny that steals children, and was told that would disturb the audience that they were going for far too much. The audience wouldn't be able to handle it without a supernatural twist to it. And as I mentioned, 2 years later, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle makes all the money in the world. But Jenny Seagrove absolutely brings the goods as the seemingly the perfect nanny at first, and then she brings the creepy, and then she brings the crazy, and then the supernatural. When she's sort of like the tree sprite, it's very hard to know what to call her. But her appearance towards the end, after she's merged with the tree and her skin is more like bark, she's sort of worth the price of entrance alone. Also great fun is any of the supernatural tree attacks. It's a weird, if you think of maybe the tree in Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, only completely practical. In fact, are there any more creepy, weird tree movies? There's this Evil Dead, there's Sleepy Hollow. I might think about that for later on. But I've got to admit, I get a little bit of a kick out of watching the tree take people out, and it does. There are moments. There are some weirdly cold, stylized, very 80s aesthetic, because it only came out in 1990, so the aesthetic is still of the 80s. almost sort of like Michael Mann type segments. And then there are these gonzo explosions of evil tree violence with decapitations and disembowelings, and then around the tree, coyote. I've got to admit, I get a kick out of the sort of gonzo ultra-violence explosions, even though tonally it's very jarring and bizarre. And as I say, either the film should be all this, like a complete Sam Raimi gonzo fest, or something more stylized that they seem to be going for at first, with the dream sequences that look like the fairy tale books and the coyotes standing in for the wolves. And there's a coyote attack about halfway through, which is very chilling and very startling. All the musical score all drops out completely, and it's played not in complete silence, but only with Foley noises. So you hear the doors opening and closing, you hear the people breathing and that, but there's no musical score, and the coyotes are gathering around the house, which is got huge windows. It's a mostly glass structure, so you can see them pacing backwards and forwards behind the guy as he's calling the police. That's superb and super stylized, and then it sort of jumps from that to a chainsaw attacking the tree, which sort of fountains blood at our hero. So you're constantly bouncing around between ideas and approaches to the story. You're also bouncing around between performances. You're bouncing from Jenny Seagrove as the nanny, who's superb, to, I forget the actor's name, who plays the dad, who in this, bless him, he plays Kevin Costner. He plays Kevin Costner's dad in Field of Dreams. In this, he's an absolute, I hate to say it, he's an absolute charisma vacuum. In a movie of this type, when one or other of the parents starts to suspect or mistrust the nanny, there's a dynamic that needs to go on, but there is nothing going on here. She's seemingly trying to seduce him. She's invading his dreams as well. He really does nothing until the stark evidence is right in front of his face of his missing baby, when he sort of has to act. Things happen around him, and there's none of that familial tension, because one of the biggest crimes of the movie is that for an enormous chunk of the film, the mother just completely disappears. Ultimately, what I chalk this up to is a curiosity. It's not a must-have. It's not a must-see. I believe that Scream Factory are going to be releasing this soon on Blu-ray. It's got its following. It's got its fans, and I can completely understand why. There are sections of this that work superbly well. One of the things that Friedkin does brilliantly, which I wish more horror directors would do, is a completely different approach to the jump scare, and he uses it with framing and editing and the use of space. And he does it more than once in this film. When the nanny appears, when she becomes full-on sort of tree goddess, pagan, baby eater, sacrificer. So rather than, you've got the mum alone in the house or with the baby, and you can see that she's got an uneasy sense of something, and rather than having her open a door and the nanny be behind it, or a jump scare or something like that, you have her get up and look around. He's shown you the space, he's moved the camera around the space, and you have her turn back round to where she had been. You see a reaction, and then it just cuts to a shot of the same space that we'd seen with her just there, placed beautifully and lit beautifully, and it's the intercutting of images that causes the shock, rather than a huge blaring noise at you and a stupid jump scare, which I fucking loathe. I'm glad I've got it. It's a misfire, but it's an interesting misfire. And perhaps if he'd have come at this material or similar material, a sort of modern day fairy tale with stuff that he was really engaged in, rather than rewrite after rewrite after rewrite, struggling to make it work, and had a clear through line for the story he wanted to tell, we could have had something really special. Friedkin's one of those frustrating directors who he always seems to swing for the fences, which I really appreciate in whatever genre he's in. He always seems to swing for the fences. So he either gets home runs or duds, and this is one of the duds. But there's the shine of something that could have been special just underneath the surface. As it is, you've got quite a schizophrenic little movie here that falls between two or three different types of stools of what kind of movie it could have been. And there's stuff in here that'll stick with you, and there's stuff in here that you'll loathe, and you will loathe the father. He's a lunk. That's the best word I can use to describe him. He's a lunk. I wish we would have stuck with the mum and seen what she thought of all of this, rather than a inexplicably almost always topless, clueless Bruce Campbell standing by the final reel, which is so bizarre. You really do kind of have to see it.